The Edge of Fate has finally arrived, which means we now have the new Armor 3.0 to grind, new tiered weapons to grind, but more importantly, new builds to create, because our stats have changed and now they matter more than anything. So it's time to dominate new worlds once again, with some new and updated builds. So today we are opening up that Season 27 class builds playlist for Season Reclamation, and first up, I introduce you to our new buffed out Titan Consecration 2.0 build. Now melee builds have seen rough nerfs lately, but also a bunch of buffs. Not only that, but our stat rework to the melee stats itself now provides an important stackable damage boost when you have your stats past 100. So for me at 198, my melee damage is increased by 29% in PvE. It's also important to note that buffs are now stackable through addition rather than multiplying, so while it's easier to stack damage buffs slightly, it also makes the damage output overall less, as we no longer have multiplying stackable buffs. Now in this video I will be going over this newly updated Titan build to work with both the artifact perks and a new stat system in place, while also taking into consideration all the nerfs and buffs affecting this build in the past. So if you guys like this one or find it useful, then be sure to leave a rating, comment, subscribe and share for more, and prepare yourselves because this is a build you really don't want to miss. Roll the intro. Now first off, before we start, I just want to take this moment to give a quick shout out to my new partnership with Gamersupps GG. They offer incredible products with a refreshing taste that will really enhance your gaming experience. So if you're after some good energy, make sure to check them out and use my Divide code for a 10% discount, link below. Now today we have a newly updated Titan Consecration build, and this thing is no joke. It's a build you can use for day 1 raid, a build you can use to make harder difficulty content easier, and a build that you can use while just farming content. It's fun, it's easy to use, and it clears ads insanely fast, and since we have new artifact perks affecting this build, we can boost our damage of that melee ability even more. So not only we're getting our prismatic aspects and fragments to improve our consecration, but we got artifact perks as well. You'll notice I am using an exotic class item, and I will go over this shortly, but I do want to point this out and make it clear that you do not need exotic class items for this build. There are other options, and I will show that later in the video, so definitely stick around to the end to see those alternatives. Now with the Edge of Fate launch, we did get a ton of changes to builds. The main changes affecting this build are firstly that we lose 1 fragment slot because of consecration, so we'll have to remove a fragment that we used to use. We also no longer have a 20% damage increase to our ignition from the consecration, but on the plus side, the knockout aspect now gives us increased damage to uncharged and charged melee attacks. So uncharged is now 150 from 100%, and charged is 160 up from 50, so quite a big increase there. One of the biggest things that makes this build so strong in endgame content is the fact that we don't just have our melee spam, we do also have 2 artifact perks that are making our weapons more lethal as well. Because by using both the Fever and Chill and Radiant Shrapnel, the artifact perks, you'll become radiant on rapid precision hits with solar weapons, and by dealing sustained weapon damage while radiant, it will release solar projectiles that deal damage to enemies. And since we have a new featured exotic system, we can take any of these exotics and apply them with the build for an even bigger damage bonus. Take Polaris Lance for example, which is a really good weapon to use with this build. Precision hits returning ammo to the mag, and also cause solar explosions every 4 precision shots. So by taking all of these into consideration, we can just sit at the back of the map like all times and melt everything with those solar explosions and not ever need to reload. We even have anti-barrier scout rifles for barrier champions as well, so Polaris Lance is a perfect weapon to pair with this build, but your alternative is Sunshot, and the weapon side doesn't really matter too much because our main goal of this build is to just spam Consecration Melees. Now basically how this build works in combat is you'll just run in, slide and melee slam into the ground on a group of enemies. This will in almost all situations, regardless of the difficulty, kill all the adds or put them at minimal health. And then from there you just keep running around and repeating the same thing and using your grenade and class ability regularly so that you can help with the ability cooldowns. It is worth bearing in mind though that you will want to generate orbs of power regularly and pick them up to get Woven Mail, because not only Woven Mail will help us with survivability, it will also increase our melee's damage by actually quite a lot, so it does help melt harder enemies in more harder content. So just remember that when you're using this build, pick up the orbs of power that you make before you start slamming to maximize the damage. Another thing to bear in mind is that we have this perk here that increases our damage to stasis debuff targets, which is why I recommend running the Glacier Grenade. It's not perfect on single targets, but with a group of enemies, it does get the job done, and it just helps with extra damage. Two other things to take into consideration as well is that Polaris Lance no longer stuns Unstoppables, so you can't double stun champions anymore, but the Consecration Slam will, so you still have those 2 champion mods covered with this build. You got the Scout Rifle for barriers, the melee ability for Unstoppables, and if you really want, you can use a weapon with Chill Clip to slow and stun overloads, so you have all 3 covered. Also pro tip, make sure that you're using barricades often, because it's so useful since it takes the majority of the damage that's coming towards you. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the exotic armor that we are using is the exotic class item. We're using the Spirit of the Assassin, so that finishers and powered melee final blows grant invisibility, as well as Spirit of Synthoceps, so our melee damage is increased while surrounded. You do have alternatives to use though. You can use the Spirit of Inmost Light with Synthoceps to help with ability spam, or if you don't want to use class items at all, then the Synthoceps itself are really good as it also buffs the super damage, so those are what I recommend with this build. In this subclass, you want to make sure that your aspects that you're using are the Consecration, as this is what the build is focused around, so just sliding and meleeing will create that slam that melts everything. Then the second aspect is knockout, so critically wounding a target or breaking a shield increases melee range and damage, and defeating targets with it makes us amplified and gives us health. For the fragments, you want Facet of Protection, so that while surrounded we are more resilient to incoming damage. Facet of Awakening, so rapidly defeating targets generates an elemental pickup. Facet of Balance, so that rapidly defeating targets will grant melee energy. And Facet of Purpose, so picking up Orbs of Power grants Woven Mail. This one is very important, especially in harder content, because of the Shield Crush artifact perk that gives us faster melees and increases the damage of that melee as well. Very strong perk to use. You just need to make sure that you're using the Blade Fury super, otherwise this won't work. But for your other abilities, I recommend you use a Rally Barricade, the Frenzied Blade for the 3 melee charges, and a Stasis Grenade. In the artifact, there are a few perks that you want to use, so I'll just go over them here. So you do have the Tightly Woven, so while we have Woven Mail, our class and grenade stats are increased. Refresh Threads, so that our elemental pickups grant ability energy. Fever and Chill for Radiant on rapid precision hits with solar weapons. And we then have these 3 perks, which will give us more damage and damage resist. And then your last perk you'll want is the Radiant Shrapnel to help benefit your weapons like Polaris Lance if you're using it. As for mods, here is the mod setup, but you do want to mostly focus on orb generation, so things like a Cypher mod and Heavy Handed in the arms, so that you can get the orbs on melee kills, but also mods that will help you get your melee ability back faster, so make sure that you put those on, and then you'll be able to run around with a higher uptime on those melee abilities. For stats though, it's pretty obvious that the melee stat is what we are going to focus on, to have them more consistently, but also with its new 200 stat system, every stat invested past 100 will increase the damage of the melee attacks, so if you can get this stat to 200 exactly, then go for it, otherwise just get it as high as you can to maximise the effectiveness of this build. Overall though, a great build to use for day 1 raid, and also endgame content currently in Destiny 2 The Edge of Fate or Season Reclamation, as a top tier Titan Prismatic solo melee build. So guys, definitely give this build a try, let me know what you think down below. The dim link is below as well, over on my Mobalytics page, so be sure to check that out, and I'll catch you guys very soon for the next build. Peace out guys.